This morning we are going to look at a text from Exodus chapter 19. I have entitled our study this morning, A Special Treasure. It comes from one of the texts, one of the verses in that part of the Bible. And I believe there are people who are watching online. We want to welcome you as well to our service this morning. So we are going to be looking at Exodus chapter 19, which we will read together. Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 to 6. I will read in your hearing. Those who may want to follow on the screen, you are free to do so. In the third month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they had departed from Rephidim, had come to the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moses went up to God. And the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, We have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. For all the earth is mine. This is the text that we're going to be looking at this morning. And as you can see, the title for the study comes from verse 6, where God is declaring through Moses that you are a special treasure to me above all the people of the earth, and the earth is mine. In the blue letter edition, it actually says, a peculiar treasure. And then I went on to try and find out, what is the meaning of special? If you say this is special, what actually do we mean by that? The dictionary definition I got here, says that, it has to be something better or greater or otherwise different from what is usual. Belonging specifically to a particular person or place. So essentially what God is saying here, I want you to be a peculiar people. I want you to be special to me and no other. Now, let's look at the definition, or how we define treasure today. Even when you go back, in the biblical times, when Jesus gave that example, of a man who saw treasure in a field. He went away and, came back and bought it because he had seen something in the ground which was treasure. People have gone on a treasure hunt in caves, in mountains, and wherever. They've got treasure kept in a bank, in a vault. Why? Because it is their gold, their silver, precious metals. They know that if they keep it in any other place, they are bound to lose it in one way or the other. That's the human definition of treasure. It is something that we keep in a safe. It is something that we keep in a vault. It is something that we keep in somewhere where it is safe, by our definition, by our understanding. And of course, when we look at what Christ actually says, about treasure, if you don't mind, come with me to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, Christ says something there in verses 19 and 20. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. Christ here is talking about where we can lay our treasure. We do have our own definition, that's okay. But let's go by the lasting way of doing things, a way that will ensure that we have real treasure that will last for eternity. Saying here, Christ speaking, moreover, when you, verse 19, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Probably that's why we have gone to the banks and have some vaults and safes, but still that is not secure enough. And then he goes on to say in verse 20, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now here Christ really makes it plain, what we need to do as far as treasure is concerned. Not here on earth where rust and thieves and moths, or where there is potential for destruction. He's saying don't do that. Regardless of the fact that we do have our own definition, Christ is looking at it and saying no, that's not the way to go. Now, as we go back to our text in Exodus chapter 19, what actually is taking place? Let's look at it closely. There is obviously a reason why, as we read chapter 19, verse 1, it starts by saying in the third month. So they've just gone 2 months after leaving Egypt. Now they are in their third month. They've gone into their third month. And why is that time very important? Why do we need to know about that particular time after they had left Egypt? It will become clear as we continue to read. So, and then also there is the mention of a place where they were supposed, or where they camped, the wilderness of Sinai. Why Sinai of all places? Didn't God have a better place for them to camp? But what we need to keep in mind is the fact that God led them through seemingly difficult circumstances for one reason and one reason only: to show them that he could provide, that God himself is not limited by circumstances. He was more powerful than their circumstances. And also in our lives today, if we see ourselves going through those the straits of life, it means one thing and one thing only: God is leading us. All we need to do is to turn to him and trust that he has it in control. God has got it. That's all we need to do, and trust God. But, as we read here, the wilderness of Sinai, then we ask the question, what is Sinai? Or what was Sinai? We're told that it is because of the bushes that were around, that the name comes from. Now, here we're also told in verse 2, they had departed from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped before the mountain. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of emphasis on the place that they are in. So obviously, you'd want to look at it closely and want to understand, why is Moses laboring on the location? Why this location? And this location is given as a wilderness. So, really from a human perspective, there will be no way to depend on self, because there are no conveniences of camping in a place where you've got access to whatever you may want, whatever you may need. Nothing like that is there. It is the wilderness. But why? Why is God specifically taking them to this place? Because something important is about to happen. God is about to do something he had never done before. The build up to all this, when you continue to read to the end of the chapter, is chapter 20. What happens in chapter 20? That is when we get the 10 Commandments. So this is the build up to it. God had to make it special. He had to have them in a special place so that he could give them a special message, because God himself appeared to the children of Israel in a special way as he spoke to them. So this is a special time. But also, when you look at this, Moses went up to God. And then God says, in verse 3, "You shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel." As I was reading, I said, hang on. God is saying to the house of Jacob. Who is Jacob? I start to think. Remember who Jacob was? Remember what he did? Jacob wasn't a good name. Wasn't a good person. Yes? That's what the Bible says. But God here is referring to the house of Jacob. But hang on. And also, he's saying, and tell the children of Israel. So there is Jacob, the bad guy. But there's also Israel, the good guy. What is God trying to say here? When Jacob left and went to Paddan, he was a bad guy. But when God had blessed him and he came back, he was okay with God. So the way I read into this was that God is saying, yes, you have a past, but guess what? You are in the present now. You are with me now. Let's go on a journey. Let's go on a journey, you and me. So Israel as a nation, he is saying, look, this message is for you. You might feel that you are still the house of Jacob, but guess what? I am in the present, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians. Let's just stop there. Let's just stop there. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. What did God do to the Egyptians? Of course, when you look at the plagues, all 10 of them in Exodus 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We see what he did, on their last night in Egypt. If you remember, when he killed the firstborn, the Passover, institution of the Passover. And of course, God's destruction of the army of Egypt in a very miraculous way. And then of course, as we continue to read, we can see that, God is saying, you've seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on wings and brought you to myself. So there are 3 things there. God is saying, you have seen it with your own eyes. There is the evidence of how I work as God, how I defend you as God. What did I do to the Egyptians? I destroyed them. You were there, you saw it, you witnessed it. Because today when you go into a court of law and you say you are a witness, it's not hearsay. You have to say, I was there, I saw what happened, this is what I saw. If you go before a judge and say, this is what I was told by such and such, you're not a credible witness, you'll be dismissed. So God here is saying, you have seen it for yourselves, how I dealt with the Egyptians. They are gone. They are no more. So should you choose not to believe that, God is saying it will be very hard for you, to forget that. It will be hard for you to miss that, because now I am teaching you, I'm letting you know, I'm taking you back to the basics, but in a powerful way, so that you can learn who I am as God as I take you on this journey. I'm taking you on this journey, but I need, to remind you of certain things. Now, if you look here, it is God who called Moses to the mountain, and it is God who is telling Moses what to say to the house of Jacob and to the children of Israel. So God here is making the first move to make sure that these people, he wins them back. He is saying, in his mercy, in his love, in his graciousness, I want these people and have a covenant with me, because I want to take them on a journey. They need to know. So these people, God is happy that they have seen what he has done to the Egyptians. And how I bore you on eagle's wings. Now, I was also curious when I came to that, and we see that, that same text in Isaiah chapter 40, verses 28 to 31. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 28 to 31, where, God says, I bore you on my wings as an eagle. And, you shall run and not be weary, and so on. But what does it actually mean? Did God actually bore them on his wings like an eagle? What does it actually mean? When I looked at it, one writer said, the eagle, when it is training its hatchling, to fly, it takes it on the wing to protect it. Flies and flies and flies. Should there be anyone who wants to shoot it down, guess what? The hatchling is protected. They would have to get the mother first. But this little hatchling is protected. God is saying, look, you are here with me. I am protecting you. Whatever comes, it has to get me first. But guess what? I am God. I'm bigger than any other circumstance. And where was the evidence? As the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea, what did God do? He put a rear guard. And there was no defense, there was no breaching of defense there by the Egyptians. They were kept there. And the children of Israel were safe. So God is essentially saying, yes, I bore you on the wings like an eagle, just go back and see what I did. I stopped the Egyptians in their tracks. Well, it wasn't their tracks, but right in the river there, they died. So he is saying, look back and see. And what is God doing here? He is making all this to a nation that has just come out of slavery. And it is a people that he needs to educate, and train. And then, of course, he goes on to say the last bit of the text there, and brought you to myself. Now, God is saying, I bore you on my wings like an eagle. Now I brought you to myself. Just me as God. Which resonates with what was being discussed here during Sabbath school. So God is saying, I've brought you to myself. You are mine. Now, if we look at the New Testament church, this is what Christ says in Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. I didn't give this to you guys, it's okay. I have it here. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. So in the Old Testament, Even when you read in Isaiah 40, it talks about being on the wings, of an eagle because of the swiftness, and how things happened. And then Christ here is saying, I want to protect you under my wings, as mother hen does to her chicks. Now, where speed is required, we see how God intervened in their situation. God is saying, hey, you know what? I've got this. Where simple protection is required, but in a godly way, I've got it too. Whichever way, I've got it. So, how can you doubt? After you've seen what God has done in your life, how can you doubt him? Because he is saying, look, look at your own life and what I have done. It is all there just for you. So when you look at Christ as he died for you and me. He died, for the unjust, that he might bring us to God. That's the ultimate. God is saying, as a peculiar people, as my special treasure, I want to bring you to myself as God, so that we can commune. I want to offer you something which is different from what you can get from anywhere else. But when I've offered you something, I want you to go out and testify about it. This is the mission that Israel had. God here is preparing them. He's preparing them so that they can look back and see he's training them, he's educating them, and things haven't gone the way that they're supposed to go in their lives, and now he's correcting that. And then, in very simple terms, which is, unmistakable as well. In Exodus chapter 34, verse 6, it says, there is the proof here that God, is merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth. And that God had honored Israel in the sight of all heavenly intelligences. He brought them unto himself into the covenant relationship and communion with him. And then, of course, verse 5 says, now therefore, if you indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure for me above all people, for all the earth is mine. In a very simple and straightforward manner, God says something here. What is he looking for? He's looking for obedience. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, that's all he's looking for. To Israel then, and to Israel today. He's looking for one thing and one thing only: obedience. But there's no way we can obey God and not keep the covenant. So God is saying, he's setting conditions here. If you will indeed obey my voice. Now, Revelation chapter 14. I didn't give it to you guys, but we'll read it here. Revelation chapter 14, verse 12. If I were to ask someone to recite, I'm sure they would easily, recite it for us. But let's read it together. It says here, and here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So the very same thing that he required of Israel of old is the very same thing that that he requires of the Israel of the day before Christ comes back again. Same thing. And then Peter says something interesting in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9, which is part of his writing there. Peter says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Now, a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his possession. That resonates with what we find in verse 6. "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." So, you obey God, you keep his commandments, and then, only then do you become a special treasure. So that's a lifestyle now. A lifestyle of obedience, a lifestyle of keeping the commandments, a lifestyle of where you then go around and be special. Not by man's definition, but by God's definition, because we know that the treasure of man is kept in a vault, in a safe, somewhere. But this treasure, the treasure of, because look at it this way. God ends the verse ends by God saying, "I'll make you a special treasure to me," so to God himself, "above all people, for all the earth is mine." He is saying, look, this is all yours. This is all yours, but the lifestyle of obedience and keeping the commandments should be yours. And when that happens, then you become a special treasure. And guess what? The earth is mine. So if the earth is his, it is also mine. When my girls at home, when they speak to their friends, you know what they say? They say, "At my house." I look at them like, these girls, they're saying they have a house. They don't. But in their understanding, what is their parents is theirs. So, I am his creation, you are his creation, and he has said, you know what, there's something that I want to give to you. The earth is mine. So, when you go around and look at the trees, when you go around and see the grass and all the marine life and everything, you know what we should say? I own that. Why? Because my daddy made it. My daddy made that. He made that for me. Why? Because I'm his special treasure. My daddy made it. That should give us joy. Because remember, this is a nation that is coming out of slavery. And God is saying, look, I want to set you on this path. Yes, there is danger. And guess what? Yes, there are times that there's going to be hunger. But don't forget that I provided for you manna. There is times that there's going to be no water. But remember, I did provide water for you. But there's also times when the water is there, but it is bitter. I provided the sweet waters at Mara. They were bitter, but I turned them to sweet. So God is essentially saying to this nation and to you and me today, I want to take you on a journey. As God, I'm extending all this to you for your benefit, so that you can be blessed. Remember, the earth is mine. You see, we all have title deeds here. We claim a piece of land to be ours, according to the standards of this world. That's okay. That's not what I'm talking about. Because my daddy owns the whole world. So why should I be limited to 300 square meters? Why? If really I am of a royal priesthood, why should I be limited? I shouldn't be. Because my daddy owns it all. And I do too. Because I am his. He has taken me to himself. I am his. So that gives me joy. And verse 6, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And the same thought is repeated in Revelation chapter 1 verse 6. If we could go there together. Revelation chapter 1 verse 6. It says here, and has made us kings and priests to his God, and to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. So, what do priests do? They serve in the temple of God. And we have been made into a kingdom of priests. The joy of belonging to God. You know, I don't know about you, but all the time people ask me, honestly, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm Aussie, mate. I got my citizenship, but where do you come from? Come from here. When I go there, they consider me a foreigner. Huh? But guess what? Because my daddy owns the whole world, I'm an international citizen, waiting to be transitioned into eternity. And so are you. I like that. Waiting for that transition. Because, and guess what? No one will ask you, where do you come from? Yeah, I'm sure no one will say I come from Earth, you know. Well, I'll leave it at that. God revealed his glory, you know, in a high mountain when you continue to read that text. And he didn't do it, you know, in a temple that was created by the hands of men, or in a building made by the hands of men. He used the temple of his own creation. If you look at it, the children of Israel, they are down here at the foot of the mountain somewhere. And then God is up in the mountain, and then he calls Moses that, hey, my tent is up there. The tent of the children of Israel is down here. Moses is the one coming from the people to the righteous God, talking to him and taking a message down. A type of Christ, bridging the gap. Now, but God is saying, I want to come down and meet my people so that they can get to see me as God. And he did it in a special way if you continue to read chapter 19. Now, like I said before, all this build-up was to reveal the importance of the law for all ages. That was the build-up to the 10 Commandments. God is particular that we keep his commandments, all 10 of them. Then shall we be his special treasure for eternity. We shall be different from what is normal, from what is expected. And because we have taken heed of God's word and have done that which he has asked us to do, we are not only hearers of the word, but we're also the doers. When we do, because that's the key, doing and keeping, then and only then will we be his special treasure. My prayer this morning, those who are watching online and those who are here today, that by His grace, we all become His special treasure as we await our translation into heaven when Jesus comes. God bless you.